15 Minutes with Marlon, trending news and headlines.
Hey everybody, welcome to 15 Minutes with Marlon, and this is episode number 7. Listen guys, today we're going to talk to you about what would I do if I go back to my first real estate transaction. What are we looking at in terms of commercial real estate finance, and what can we do to help improve entrepreneurship? All right guys, so we're going to kick it off today with some headlines, some news, some tips, and topics of the day. So go ahead, let's get started guys.
What is entrepreneurship?
What is entrepreneurship? Listen, it is the ability to put things together, put people together, put processes in place, and execute, right? Some guys have high-level ideas. Other guys want to get into the nitty-gritty details. But as an entrepreneur, you have to put it all together, all of it, right? I was on a phone call today with a very nice individual, and he said something. He said, hey, you seem to be like the telescope and microscope, right? You're looking at things from a very high level, and then you're looking at things from the most detailed minutia. And that is absolutely correct. You have to do that. You have to look at things from the highest possible level. Look at the playing field. Look at the business climate, understand the markets, see who the competitors are, right? And find out, once you have that, a deep dive into the details of the business. So entrepreneurs are going to do that every single day. They're going to find a way to put people together, to put people in the right opportunities for them to succeed, right? So you work with people because you want them to succeed. You want them in their positions to grow, to be challenged, and to be successful. In turn, they're going to help you build this vision. So collaboratively, you're working on it together, right? So you have to find the right individuals that are going to match the vision that you're looking at put together. And if you could do that, that's one part. That's the people part, right? You have to do that. Also, you have to have unlimited, unwavering focus on what you're trying to do to accomplish the goal, whatever that business is going to be. It could be a brick and mortar store, it could be an online store, it could be a real estate development projects like the ones that I do, it could be anything you're thinking of. It could be just how do you sell something and you buy it for cheap and you sell it for more. It doesn't matter. What does matter is you have to have laser-like focus on what it is you're trying to accomplish. If you do that, if you have that energy and that focus, it's going to be a lot better of a ride for you. So you have to have focus, right? You have to be able to pinpoint out where there are market opportunities, right? Where is there a gap in the market that you're going to be able to bring value to customers? So in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, how can I bring value, right, to other people? How can I bring value to other businesses? How can I bring value all the time? Value is an overstated word. Everybody talks about bringing value. But what do you really have to do to bring value? Well, that's pretty easy. Help others bring customers to their business. Help others save money on what they're doing. Help others save time. So helping people generate income, helping people save money, or helping people save time. Those are areas where you'll be able to pinpoint, right, market opportunities that you can bring value in. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. So as an entrepreneur, as a real estate developer, to me, it's one of the most entrepreneurial, businesses that are out there. Why? Because you're taking something that does not exist. You're taking a vision from your mind. You're finding all the right resources that are going to help you execute this vision forward. The architects, the engineers, the land planners, the zoning planners, the corporate attorneys, the lenders, the equity investors, the contractors, the subcontractors, the material suppliers, the municipalities, the local government, state government, all of those. You're bringing everybody together to be able to carry the vision forward. So it takes working with many others. So you have to be able to communicate. So entrepreneurship is massively about communication. The more you communicate, the better your entrepreneurial track is going to be. That doesn't mean, none of this means you're going to be successful. It just means those are some of the things that you need to do. You have to work with people, right? You have to be able to create a process that can be repeatable, that if you're not able to execute, somebody else could come in and execute that process for you, right? In case you're not available at that moment or in case you're working on something else. So it has to be repeatable. Very important. How do you take a structure in a building and replicate it from one spot to the next, right? So you have to be able to build those processes in place, right? Ultimately, you have to work with people. It's always very important. And then if you want to stay in entrepreneurship for a long time, you better be profitable, because it makes no sense to do businesses that make no profit whatsoever. There are different business models that maybe add, revenue type of businesses or have longer term strategy. That's all fine. But eventually, guys, no matter what you do, you have to have profitability. Because if you don't have profitability, how are you going to reinvest back into your company? How are you going to pay back your loans, your equity investors, your startup capital? You have to become profitable at some point. Everybody talks about how wonderful entrepreneurship is, but it is very challenging. And I challenge you, if you guys are looking to do that, get after it today. All right, next question.
If you can go back to your first startup, what single decision would you insist in?
So the first startup, the first business, the first transaction that I did, I would say the first thing that I would do differently, right, is I wouldn't necessarily focus so much. I focused very much on the property that I was able to afford, right? Because at that point in time, what was I able to get involved in? That's what I did, versus how excellent of a deal this could be or could not be. So the first deal was a single family house, right? It was an all cash transaction, and we renovated it. We put in some money. I think the total acquisition was about $50,000. So it was a $50,000 house. I had saved up funds, bought it for $50,000, invested, I want to say maybe about $25,000 in getting the kitchens, the cabinets, getting all of it, sort of up to par. Remember, we carved off a dividing wall that was there. We took it down. We opened up the kitchen. We turned it into something really nice. But the market was, the market area was so-so. Was not the best, right? But it was a very stable income producing area, right? But it wasn't the best. And my thought at that point in time, I was looking to try to generate more money. So what did I do? I did all that. I bought it. We renovated. We fixed the roof. We put in new ACs, and the market crashed, right? The market crashed, and even though this was like around 2008, 9. Everything was kind of tanking. We picked it up at a good price, right? It was very cheap, but things didn't really go up as fast as I thought, right? I thought they were going to go up a lot faster. And so the only exit that I had at that point in time was to hold it. I held it. It carried itself. I rented it out, put it back on the market, and eventually I sold it, right? So it was a learning lesson. It took about a year. And I think about this, it took a year to go through that process, and the building right behind me took an entire year to construct and develop, right? So when I sort of look at those two things, my first project took about the same amount of time as this one did. So, you got to look at those things. Look at your cost of entry and look at how long things are going to take you. So be sure what you're getting into, and don't necessarily get involved in something just because that's where you can get involved in, right? It's always good to start, but maybe there could have been other opportunities of entering into the real estate, market. It was just the one that I had in hand. Really want to get involved. Got there, got hands dirty, went through that process, and realized single family houses were not something that I was going to be doing. Wasn't something that I was very passionate about. And so I moved on from there as quickly as I could. Next question.
How does commercial real estate financing work?
All right, so commercial real estate financing, a lot of guys like to make this extremely complicated. It almost sounds like you need a 4-year degree plus a master's degree plus some specialization plus all of this other stuff. Guys, I try to simplify things so that a third grader can understand it. And the way you simplify it is like this. First and foremost, right? any real estate transaction is going to need pretty much two things. One, it's going to need debt. And two, it's going to need equity. Now, there might have been a time when you could have gotten a 100% loan on a property and you didn't need any debt, right? However, those times don't exist. Most of the time, a real estate investor doesn't really want to come in and put 100% of equity. So imagine you have a $10 acquisition, and in that $10 acquisition, 50% of that is a loan, $5, and the other 50% of that is equity, another $5. So that's at its most basic function. But part of real estate finance is you have to understand all the numbers that are inside. So how are you going to pay back the debt? How long is the debt? Is the interest rate going to be okay in this particular transaction, right? If the interest rate is much too high, maybe the deal wouldn't work at all. So you have to understand your cash flows over time. On a ground up new construction, there is no cash flow. So you have to understand that part, right? There's no cash flow until it starts generating income. If you're buying something that's existing, if you're buying 10 units, right? And let's say 2 of your units are vacant, is the loan that you're bringing and placing on this property, is the loan still going to be able to be covered by the other 8 units? If they are, then you're good. Hopefully 6, you can be vacant with 4 units and the loan will still be able to cover it. So you have to look at those things. But at its most simplest process, you have to understand the income that comes in, the expenses that go out, and the amount that's remaining. And that's your net operating income. Key word, net operating income. If you remember that, you'll be able to determine whether this deal can cash flow or not. So you have debt, you have equity, you have interest rates, and you kind of put all this together in very simple, on a sheet of paper, you can determine, can I finance this property? Well, simply put, if you have 10 units and each one's bringing in $1,000 a month, that's $10,000 of income that you're bringing in, right, from this particular property. And now, let's say half of that income goes out to pay for the debt. How much are you left with now? You're left with 5, right? After that, you still got to pay taxes, insurance, maintenance. Well, out of the 5, you might now be left with 2. One goes to, let's say, the partnership, and you're left with 1 at the end, right? In a very basic way to understand a real estate finance transaction, you want to make sure that you're left with something at the end, unless you're going through a renovation or a new construction or something else that prohibits any cash flow during the initial time frame. But at some point in time, you want to make sure that income produces, that it cash flows. That is important. If you don't have that, not much sense in real estate altogether. So that's just a really high level description of a little bit of how real estate finance works. Next question.
How can I tell if a property is a good investment?
How can you tell if a property is a good investment? That's a good question. You have to understand a couple different things. 1, is it generating income? 2, are you buying it for the appreciation? So let's look at those 2 a little bit differently, right? 1 is, if you're buying it because it produces income, how much of that income is actually going to be going over to you? After you've paid your debt, after you've paid your taxes, your maintenance, your insurances, everything else that you need to pay, how much is left over? And then when you see that number that's left over, right, that's your cash flow. That's your cash flow after everything else is paid back. Then you take that number and you simply divide it by the amount of investment you've put in. So I'll give you an example. If you get $1 back and you put in $10, right, as your investment, that's 10%. It's a really good return, right? Some investors will take that all day long. Other investors will not. Other guys won't even look at things unless they get a 20% return. But they all depend. They depend on how much risk there is, right? And so if you have a lot of risk, you're gonna have a lot of return. If you don't have a lot of risk and it's very stable, then all of a sudden it's okay to take in a much lower risk and a much lower yield for yourself. So risk plays a huge part in understanding which real estate investment, and if it's a good real estate investment. You got to think, are you buying for appreciation for the future, right? Appreciation is how did that property's value increase? Is it because something happened in the neighborhood? There's jobs coming in, there's, office buildings, retail. Is something happening in this market that's going to help the property go up that maybe the previous owner doesn't really care about, is looking to move on, and you're able to get it at a good price, but yet achieving the future market appreciation. So those are two basic elements that you got to look for when you're doing these. All right, guys, it's been 15 minutes with Marlon. I hope you guys have been well today. Take care and stay safe out there.
15 minutes with Marlon. Trending news and headlines.